Okay, I think we're gonna get started now. Good morning, everyone, once again from the Spanish Stream of Commerce in the UK. To this and welcome to this morning's Brexit and Beyond technical webinar, the 10th edition and possibly our last. We're not quite sure yet. Which is on the topic of the impact of Brexit on SMEs. So for this morning's session, we're delighted to be joined by Claire Sarson from the Department for Business, Energy and Industrial Strategy. I'm just going to hand over now to Eduardo Barachina, who's the president of the Chamber, to give some opening remarks.
Thanks very much, Hannah, and good morning, everyone. Buenos dias. This is one of our final Brexit seminars that we've been organizing with different departments from Her Majesty's government, and I'm delighted that Claire from BASE is coming. Ever since Brexit agreement was started to be negotiated by the different parties, we at the Chamber made a huge effort to bring SMEs into the actual debate so they were informed. In fact, last year we started the year with an actual seminar at BASE, probably our first and last physical event last year. We welcomed last year Mike Sherry, the national chairman of the SMEs Federation. We are welcoming today Claire Sarson from BASE, who will walk us through different aspects. We know that SMEs play a key important role in British economy and Spanish economy. Around 6 million SMEs are registered in the United Kingdom, and we're delighted that most of the members of the Spanish Chamber of Commerce in the United Kingdom are made of SMEs. At the same time, a great number of SMEs in Spain export to the United Kingdom, and we are in the Chamber, we are determined to help them to navigate Brexit. The main challenge, and Claire will be the expert and will walk us through the main challenges are obviously for SMEs to adapt, to readjust to the new situation, rules of origin, VAT, new requirements, technical standards, and so on. So this is the main challenge our members face, and we do want Claire to share her thoughts, her ideas, and suggestions to our members. So Claire, gracias, muchísimas gracias. Thank you very much. And I hope you all enjoy Claire's session. And I hand over to you now, Claire. Good morning.
Well, thank you very much, Eduardo, for that lovely introduction. And I'm really delighted to be here. Hello, everybody. Really nice to, well, not meet you. I don't know what the word is, but really great to be here. As Eduardo says, I will talk about the Brexit challenges. I think we can be quite honest that they are challenges. I was also going to talk a bit, if I may, about the sort of concurrent COVID challenges, because this has been what we call a double whammy for UK businesses over the last few months, year, and adaptation has, the two things have been quite interlinked, and the challenges have been sort of mutually supporting. So I'll talk a bit about that as well. I'll turn to the post-Brexit challenges, as I've just mentioned. I'll also talk a bit about the provisions in the EU-UK trade deal, the Trade and Cooperation Agreements, where we have a chapter on SMEs, and I'll talk a bit about what that is and how we propose to approach it. So if that's okay. So if you could just bear with me a second, I'm just going to share my screen. Apologies, one second. I'd be grateful, Hannah, if you could let me know if that's all come up all right. Is that clear?
Looking good, yeah.
Great, thank you. So as I just mentioned, these are the things that I will cover today. And by the way, apologies, just before I start, I meant to say a couple of things. Firstly, thank you very much for listening to me in English. I am always very, very grateful for that. Secondly, I also meant to just mention a little bit more about who I am and why I'm doing this talk today. I'm head of the International SME policy in the Department for Business, in the UK. My team were responsible for negotiating the SME chapter in the agreement, which is why I'll refer to that in a minute. We also are looking at SME chapters in other trade deals that we are making at the moment, including, for example, with Australia and New Zealand. And I also am involved in promoting SMEs in our multilateral fora, so the WTO, and a lot of active work going on in the OECD at the moment on this, and I'll refer to that a little bit as I go through my presentation. So that's me, and that's my background. So as mentioned, I'll cover these areas. Just starting with a little bit of background on the SME landscape in the UK, which Eduardo sort of kindly referred to a couple of the key figures here. So I think it's pretty much the same as Spain, in that SMEs account for 99.9% of businesses in the UK. It's a figure that never ceases to amaze me, but that's that's the sort of percentage we're talking about. As Eduardo said, about 6 million in the UK that accounts for. Now, I just wanted to sort of pull out a couple of figures here, which I'll talk about in a little bit more detail as we go through today. One is obviously we're focusing on trade today, and estimates are about 10% of UK SMEs trade internationally. I mean, this is still pretty low, and this is something that we have specific challenges on right now, but a specific focus on as well in improving that. So I'll come back to that in a moment. And then the other main issue that occupies my ministers and our government right now is really how to get what are really, frankly, quite high numbers of startups in the UK. We're 7th highest across OECD countries in numbers of businesses that actually start up. We don't have a problem with that. Actually, it's been pretty high. But what we find, however, is that failure rate is also high, and often business births get to business deaths in about a year. So I'll talk a bit about some of the ways that we're attempting to tackle that. But that's actually one of the main sort of drivers behind some of the post-Brexit recovery that we want to see. And then just to say that tech will always be a major focus for us. It's a reasonable success story in the UK, but innovation and supporting cutting-edge tech companies is another focus, which I can talk a bit about as well. Just to say as well that I think similar to Spain, most of the SMEs are in the sort of services, construction sectors as well. So there's a reasonably similar profile. So it's always useful to sort of share information and sort of our plans to sort of grow SMEs in our respective countries. One thing I just wanted to mention briefly here as well, as we talk about SMEs in general and their importance to the economy. You may be aware that in the OECD very recently, what was a working party on SMEs and entrepreneurs actually has just been elevated to what you call a committee. So that means that SMEs have and supporting SMEs as drivers in our economy has just taken on a new importance in the OECD. And I do think that sort of reflects, what we're talking about today and how important it is that we that we continue to keep our focus on these smaller businesses. So, if I may just talk briefly about COVID. And as I say, there's quite a lot of writing on these slides, which will be for you to look through in slower time. But I was just going to sort of pick up a couple of points on each slide, if I may. I mean, look, we're all in the same place on this. I mean, our GDP estimates that it's the lowest in 300 years, certainly since records began in 1948. Economists are suggesting, however, that there is forecast of a strong recovery. Much depends on consumer spending, and much depends on when we do finally get into a clear post-COVID period. But this is where our focus now is to capitalize on growing that. I've mentioned on this slide, although I don't propose to go through them in detail, some of the schemes that we've had in the UK to support businesses through COVID, and no doubt some of this will be familiar to you in your own country. I mean, these are just absolutely eye-watering figures in terms of how much support government has provided for business. And it remains to be seen how business recovers in the longer term. One thing I was just going to mention here particularly is I've mentioned the Future Fund, and this was kind of, as well as kind of keeping business salaries going, enabling people to access quite easy, quick loans. There was also a focus on really trying to keep businesses afloat who rely on sort of equity investment. So there's high growth companies through what we call a future fund. And again, this is something that I'm happy to return to, and we'll sort of see where that's got us. So there was a sort of spectrum, if you like, of different types of loans and schemes to sort of help people through the actual COVID period. In terms of the post-COVID period, I just wanted to break down some of the thinking that we've been that sort of occupying ministers right now in terms of a sort of new strategy for growth. If I just may mention three sort of overarching initiatives. A lot of the thinking and the plans and the activity that we are putting in place now to support SMEs results from a sort of very significant business productivity review that we undertook a couple of years ago. And a lot of the thinking that developed is driving much of our current activity. So that suggested to us that it's around ensuring SMEs have leadership and management training, absolutely improved access to technology, and something around mentoring and peer support. And so these are themes that you'll see in our sort of onward planning. There's this phrase, build back better. I don't know if it's a UK thing or if it's a more global thing, but that's sort of part of trying to sort of capitalize on some of the new thinking, the new ideas, the new industries, the new ways of working that we've developed, that the COVID has created. We'll sort of see what sort of ideas they come up with. But I particularly wanted to mention the enterprise strategy, because I think this is really where, not right now, because it's under development, but I think this is really where, under this umbrella, a lot of the thinking to support SMEs will come together in one sort of consolidated plan, which will be sort of published a bit later this year. And behind that is really our efforts to, I think, sort of slightly break down what we understand by SMEs. I know our ministers sometimes have trouble with the term SME because it actually incorporates completely different types of businesses, as you will well know. People who are single traders and only ever want to be single traders, to micro businesses, to businesses that are middle-sized, 250 employees around, which is a very, very different type of business. And so something that the enterprise strategy will focus on is support for those specific groups and their needs. If you're a micro, if you're a scale-up, if you're a driver, if you're a more middle-sized driver of a business. there's going to be a quite renewed focus on trying to sort of create a stronger ecosystem for entrepreneurs, more of a sense of taking a stigma away from failing, make big focus on sort of supporting diversity among SMEs. I happened to be in a meeting yesterday with a number of businesses under the Etsy umbrella, which you may know about. A lot of small traders, and it was really interesting to me that they're predominantly women. I think 80% of Etsy traders are women, which I found really interesting. But it's that sort of focus on women and disabilities and young people is also going to be sort of part of the strategy. So this is something that I'm definitely keen to come back to, and elements of what I'm about to say will be sort of incorporated in that strategy as we develop it. Just really quickly to go through a couple of these slides. Again, I won't go through all of this in general, but as I say, in the UK, we have a kind of a double hit of kind of coming out of the COVID crisis and adapting to Brexit. And so a lot of the schemes to support business are kind of in both those areas. So I think what this slide is about is I've just mentioned a couple of the things that really try and ensure that the lag and there's no gap or there's no let up in financial support, and that the financial support that has been provided to get through the COVID period is not suddenly taken away. So some of the loan schemes have sort of evolved into sort of new schemes. So the bounce back loan schemes have sort of morphed into a sort of pay as you grow, which sort of allows top ups. The startup loans program I mentioned here is going to be really, really critical. Massive amount of loans given out over the last 10 years, and that's sort of seen as one of our sort of flagship programs to really sort of help businesses that want to start and want to grow, that they have that support to do it. And you know, a lot of these loans will be operated by our British Business Bank, which you might be familiar with, and they can certainly talk through in more detail than I can a range of the packages that they provide. I just wanted to touch on the sort of digitalization points. I mean, clearly, as similar in your market, I'm sure, you know, businesses may have digitalized in a faster and a greater way than they may have expected to, because of COVID and its impact. Now, there's a couple of sort of, again, fairly significant schemes that have just been put in place in the UK under a banner called Help to Grow. And these are really, they're just getting started now. So I'll have to come back to you at a later date to sort of let you know how we're getting on. But it was really just about trying to give businesses access to free technology and software, and at the same time access to training and advice. Again, it goes back to the productivity review I mentioned, where these were seen as kind of gaps in what we currently provide for SMEs. So these are quite major programs that we're just starting to roll out, but the idea is that we really build on some of that sort of tech capability that may have been discovered over the last year or so. And then again, you know, supporting sort of innovation, as I mentioned, is just going to be critical, and kind of the evolution of some of these schemes to make sure that businesses that are high growth, high end tech, there isn't a gap and they don't lose that access to funding and equity support. So again, the sort of future fund sort of there's a sort of new project which is about sort of co-investing with private investors and government. So again, I mean, I should say as a general point that a lot of this is kind of in building up stage. So I'll come back to you on kind of how you know, what impact these are making on the ground. Just finally on on our sort of focus on long-term sort of post-COVID recovery, I mentioned diversity, and we have a couple of significant initiatives in the UK at the moment to support, firstly, female entrepreneurs and young entrepreneurs. I mean, again, this will be a focus of the new kind of overarching enterprise strategy that we're bringing together. Again, just to mention the OECD, there's a lot of really important thinking that's going on in that organisation, which we're talking about, which colleagues of mine in BEIS and across government are sort of looking at how we develop that. Again, really brilliant to get any sort of thoughts and advice on what's worked in Spain to sort of support that wider diversity among SMEs. And again, I should say that in the UK, it's really also about diversity of region, and really making sure that it's across the whole of the UK, and that's sort of a big part of what we'll be doing. And of course, I as hosts of the COP26, the UN climate change conference later this year, I have to mention net zero, and again, a clear thread that will be running through our wiser BEIS objectives and our support for SMEs. Again, we're working with the British Business Bank and others about how we can sort of support SMEs to bring in sustainability in their working practices. So again, you know, we could talk a separate session on that, but you know, as kind of leaders of COP26 this year, I know that sort of bringing business in and supporting awareness and uptake of specific actions will be sort of part of our objectives for that programme. If I may now sort of turn to trade. Just putting a couple of kind of facts and statistics up on the screen now. I mean, I mentioned earlier we have about 10% of SMEs around that we think trade. None of this will be a surprise to you. I don't think. The EU still our largest trading partner. The US, our largest single country for exports. China, our largest single country for imports. In terms of Brexit, what we've seen since January is that trading goods took an absolute dive in January. It was down 40%. Some recovery, some rebound in February, but what's turned out to be, I think, a sort of 20% drop in trade over the first quarter of this year in goods, with services a little harder to read right now because of COVID, but that fell sort of 20% by 2020, in 2020, sorry. So, you know, obviously there's different factors here. Stockpiling, what worries about that sort of initial period in January, getting the deal so late in December caused a massive amount of uncertainty, of course. Now, I mean, I'll just moving on to the sort of next slide where I'll start to go through some of the issues, and apologies for some of the the amount of text on this slide. We've been doing quite a lot of work and thinking about what the issues are that SMEs are facing since January. As a general point, I would say that, again, because several factors, including COVID, have come together, it's a question of working out where issues are short-term and where there are sort of more long-term systemic problems that we have to face. And frankly, things that are simply not going to be solved because we left the EU and things are just not that easy now for certain ways. So there's some separation of the issues, as you can imagine. I mean, what we're seeing, and again, I'm sure none of this will be a particular surprise to you, You know, particularly SMEs, the sort of burden of new paperwork at the border and health certificates, for example. Massive issue is understanding complex rules that we simply didn't have to understand before. Rules of origin, visas and VAT seem to be coming up all the time. And then sort of additional costs of haulage and shipping. And again, I'm sure you've got your own experiences of these things as well. Needless to say, I think SMEs are always likely to be more hit by these problems. You know, as I mentioned just now, some data coming through suggesting that there is some recovery, but we are still at lower points. With trade with Germany and France, for example, shows some recovery. I'm afraid I couldn't find a statistic for Spain, but if you've got one, let me know. You know, as you would expect, manufacturing, retail, wholesale are the most affected, and they are the ones who are impacted by the things I just mentioned: the new customs procedures, rules of origin, tariffs, non-tariff barriers. Those are the issues that have come up the most. And again, as I think you might expect, somehow, you know, transport, storage done a little better because that's in such demand at the moment. What we're seeing, as I say, some recovery, slow recovery. It feels like there's a small but important minority of traders who are saying we're just not doing it. We're just not trading with the EU anymore. It's just too difficult. And as I mentioned, this call I had with Etsy yesterday was a bit depressing because they were some of the people that I happened to speak to yesterday who were saying, we just don't know how to trade with Europe now. We just don't know. We haven't got the time to go through all of the guidance. We know it's there. We know there's tons of guidance, but I can't go through it. So, you know, that there are issues there. On a more positive note, sort of data from our British Chambers of Commerce from a couple of months ago have said that, you know, 40% of EU exporters do intend to keep exporting, do intend to grow their business. So again, I think it goes back to the point I made just now about only time will tell whether these are sort of short-term issues that will resolve once people get a grip of the new environment, the new things they have to do, and where people, you know, are just changing their practices because of longer term issues. In terms of trying to address it, I just wanted to point to a couple of things. As you can imagine, a lot of what government can do, government, business representative bodies, intermediaries, a lot of what we can do is just purely provide information. There is not a lot we can do in many ways in terms of making it easier. It is just a case of showing what's new and showing what's different. So that focus on providing advice and information. There's actually a specific Brexit support fund that was established, which enables SMEs particularly to get access to professional advice and training. So somebody who's actually trained in going through the customs and the rules of origin, etc. Again, a bit too early to say how well that's going and how many people are using it and how useful they're finding it, but hopefully this is data we'll get. And then there's a specific section, there's a specific bit of advice, which I've got web addresses for this, by the way, at the end, if you're interested, but specifically around trade with Northern Ireland, which has obviously got its own complications. I wanted to particularly mention here as well, at the moment, and in fact, I've just come from a meeting where my colleagues in the Department for International Trade are at the moment working on how we can really rationalise and consolidate our export advice. So in sort of having one place to go, one window, one helpline, rather than what we have at the moment, which is sort of a mass of information, but still not 100% clear where to go. And so that sort of work that's going on as we speak, to be sort of announced a little bit later this year. And also something that's being worked on is a single trade window, which some other countries have this, and this is really meant to be a one-stop shop to clear the UK border in a single journey, and that is both ways. That is for importers and exporters. Some other countries have it, including Sweden, New Zealand, Australia. We're developing it right now. So this really should, for those importing and exporting into the UK, it's really trying to become one place where you can put in one set of information, which will allow you to, have access to all the forms that you need to fill out in one window. It's ambitious. It's going to take a little while, but it feels to me exactly the kind of thing that we need if we're going to sort of go through the complications and ensure that the imports, which, for those who want to import into the UK, but also for our own businesses who need imports, that simplifies the process. So that's under construction as we speak. And then, as I mentioned before, it's also about sort of making sure that we have a much better offer and trade advice offer across the whole of the UK. So we've got new hubs being set up in all parts of the UK to sort of help people get that sort of face-to-face access to trade advisors, where online information is not going to be enough. I won't go into this because it's not my area of expertise, but I know our colleagues in the UK Export Finance are sort of setting up a sort of number of new products to help sort of support traders through that sort of export guarantee process. And then finally, if I may turn to actually, my apologies. There's one thing I meant to say before I turn to the TCA, is that some reading that I was just doing about Spain and your own efforts to internationalise and help your SMEs internationalise, it feels like there was a really brilliant bit of success that you've been having in terms of your own internationalisation strategy and some of the programs that you've put in place that seem to sort of really get businesses exporting over the last couple of years, sort of 2.7% extra, 51 billion more SMEs exporting. That sounds really interesting. It's something that obviously we're struggling to do, and I just raised that as maybe something we could talk about a little bit more. Anyway, sorry, my last slide. I just wanted to turn to what's actually in the agreements to support SMEs. Now, you may have seen this chapter. An SME chapter is fairly standard in FTAs these days, which is great news. It is something that is contained in this deal, and I've just kind of tried to pull out a couple of the key points for us. At the top, the objective of the chapter, it says it commits both parties to enhance the ability of small and medium-sized enterprises to benefit from the deal. Now, we in the UK take this quite literally and generally quite proactive in our approach to this chapter, because it seems to me that, everything that we're talking about today, we need to sort of make sure we use this chapter as a lever to really do what we can to support SMEs. So I put that there as a sort of, as our very much our approach is to really seek out ways to do that. Now, as you may know, in SMEs chapters, a lot of the focus of an SME chapter is around information sharing and information provision, so that SMEs in the respective markets have clear and easy access to online information. The TCA specifically creates provisions for a searchable database so that you can look up customs procedures, intellectual property regulations, procurement, taxes, rules of origin, duties, tariffs, commodity codes, all of those things. We in the UK have quite sophisticated tools to do this. It's run by my colleagues in DIT, and hopefully it works, although I think we need to keep seeking to improve, and something that we will be discussing with our counterparts in the European Union, in the European Commission, to ensure that the respective information is there, and that any feedback that SMEs or businesses who want to trade into the UK are they finding the information? Is it actually quite unclear? It's obviously continuous improvement for us is the name of the game. And I mentioned just now that actually that online information and streamlining the information we provide for SMEs is a big feature for us in the UK. And then lastly, I just wanted to mention that the deal establishes a contact point, which is actually me and my team in the UK and colleagues in the European Commission. And, you know, we're responsible for making sure that we are delivering on those commitments to share information. It also provides for parties to consider opportunities to strengthen cooperation on matters relevant to SMEs, which includes, by the way, involving external parties. Now, again, this is something that we take quite literally and quite seriously. And in fact, next week, we're about to have our sort of first meeting with the colleagues from the European Commission to sort of discuss our approach to this role and sort of how active and proactive we both want to be in working together to support SMEs. It's very much my intention and our intention to really work through some of the issues with them, some of the ones that I've mentioned today around paperwork and some inconsistencies at the border as to what's required, and things that without any ability to change the deal, what is it that we can do together to make sure that people understand what the issues are, that people have the training and the expertise and the information they need? How can we work up a cooperation program? So again, and this is something that I will be asking my own colleagues and partners across the UK, including your equivalent organisations, the Federation of Small Business, the CBI and others. You know, what do we want to see in that dialogue, and how can we make it work for the benefit of SMEs? So again, hopefully a start of a useful conversation. And then just finally, I've just put here some of the links to some of the websites that I've been mentioning during this talk. You may be very familiar with these, but if not, they do provide quite a lot of information for both those exporting and importing into the UK. Obviously, the Commission's website you're probably familiar with, but that's their SME equivalent. And then I mentioned briefly the Trade Supporter Service, which is specifically about trying to help with the access at the Northern Ireland border, which, as you say, has its own complications and maybe is for a longer separate session another time, or maybe you've had it. So apologies, I don't know how long I've gone on for there, but I suspect it was too long. I'll stop there, and I'm happy to take questions. If I can't answer your question, I very much hope that I can take it away and maybe come back to you. But thanks ever so much, and I'll stop there.
Brilliant. Thank you so much, Claire. There's a lot of really, really useful information there, really packful. So absolutely perfect. Thank you so much. Yeah, so if anyone has any questions that they would like to ask at this point in time, please write those in now. You can either use the chat function there or the Q&A function that you can see on the panel at the bottom of your screen in Zoom. Okay, and if not, you can also ask, if you direct any questions you might think about after to me, and then I could perhaps relay them to Claire afterwards if you prefer to ask a question that way. Okay, Claire, here's one we've got. You mentioned the trade investment hubs. So how someone's asked, how can a trade investment hub help my business to grow internationally? Perhaps you could expand on that a little.
Yeah, absolutely. So this is part of what our Department for International Trade. This is part of a number of issues, a number of elements to sort of a strategy to help businesses internationalize. So what they, and apologies if I may have to come back to you on further information on this, because I know that this is still something that's being established. So what they are is just really trying to ensure that we have a whole of UK approach to sort of supporting businesses across our devolved administrations and across the whole of all of the English regions. Now, what we have at the moment is we do have an international network of advisors. I think there's about 300 across the UK who are there to support businesses who want to internationalise. So that exists at the moment. The very numerous challenges that Brexit have thrown up are making two things happen. One is a sort of enhancement of those trade advisors and quite a lot of upskilling. So as you can imagine, lots of learning for us, for our trade advisors about, you know, how can we in an expert way advise people on detailed questions they may have, for example, about rules of origin. So as I understand it, the hubs are just kind of meant to be enhanced areas of expertise, enhanced networks, bigger expertise centres across the country. If I may, I'd like could I sort of offer to send some further information about precisely when these things will be set up and what the offer is. And I do apologise, I'm not 100% clear on my own right now what the offer is across for other SMEs who may be importing into the UK. But I know I would be able to get further information on that if you didn't mind. And sorry if I haven't got it all to hand right now.
I was on mute, sorry. That would be great. Thank you, Claire. That'd be perfect. Thank you. So, okay, another question about the help to grow the digital scheme. Okay, someone's asked, how can I know if my business is eligible and how can I apply for it?
So could I just ask, is this a business in Spain or in the UK? It's
a business in the UK, this one.
Okay, right, thank you. Hi there. So yes, good question. I think it's open to anyone. Again, I'll provide you with some further details. Like a lot of what I said today, apologies, it's been, we're in sort of setup mode on that at the moment. But I think, yeah, I think it's open to anyone. Sorry, I did have a bit of information up. Yeah, apologies. Do you mind if I undertake to get back to you about that? But be really interested in understanding kind of what the you know, how sort of useful that sounds to you, and hopefully that will be a real driver to help businesses get that extra ability to access in either software or support, be it technical or be it more on the management side. But if I may, sorry, I'm taking another one away.
No, that's great.
There's a lot more information I can give you, and I'd rather just send it on.
Yeah, no, that'll be perfect. Thank you. Another question we had, the last one was about the regional growth hub. Is that one, maybe perhaps you could send some more information about that one too?
Yeah, absolutely. So if I've read you right, that's so regional growth hubs exist at the moment. Yes, I think that's what you mean. There's about 36 of them across the country, and these are they're not just to do with trade, they're to do with any sort of business support. They're run by BEIS. You may have had contact with them. And again, what we are doing right now in the context of trying to improve and consolidate the support that we are providing to business in terms of post-COVID recovery and in terms of trade is sort of making sure that any new systems we put in place to consolidate support and streamline the support we give are highly connected, whether you go online, whether you call up a helpline, or whether you use our growth hubs, which is sort of more face-to-face support advisory service. So for us, the challenge is not the amount of advice that's out there, because there's a lot. The challenge is the advice properly triaged? And if you go to a growth hub, and again, I can provide the details on that, are you getting passed through to the right person, to the right channel? And it's that streamlining and ease of use that is what we're all about. The growth hubs are a really big part of that, and I can send you sort of further information about how active they are in the new sort of strategy we're developing.
Yeah, great, thank you. That would be perfect, and I can communicate that with everyone who has taken part today, but also everyone who registered in the end hasn't participated too, because it will of course be a topic that's of interest to them. Well, that's the questions that we received in. So thank you very much, Claire, for answering those and for your presentation. Again, it was really useful. Yeah, as we mentioned, I will circulate the PowerPoint that Claire's used today, so that you can refer to it in the future and share it with perhaps a colleague or contact of yours you think it could be of use to. But yeah, thank you again for joining us, and I just encourage you all who've joined us today to keep an eye on the events page of our website, because we're continuing doing lots more different useful online events. So yeah, have a great day, Claire, and thank you again for joining us.
No problem. Thanks very much. Thank you very much.
Everyone.
Good to see you.
Likewise. Bye bye.